how can you possibly forgive me all the things that I've done? I can clearly still hear those words. I forgive you, Geoff, because I love you more than you could ever possibly imagine. Whenever I feel like, I'm lost and lonely and in need of a friend, I know Jesus is there. My name is Geoffrey Parsons. I live in Corio. For 52 years. I just lived a life of doing whatever I wanted to do. It was about the age of 16 that I started to contemplate, I suppose, a life other than, getting married and having children. I was really felt a calling, I suppose you could call it, to enter a religious life. I was working as a young teenager at Woolworths, but it never really gave me a lot of satisfaction. And so at the age of 18, I decided to join the MSCs, the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart. My mother in particularly was overjoyed. She was so happy for me. My father, not so much. He wanted to keep me at home to help around the house and with the farm and so on. But my mind was made up. So I told Mum that I was leaving. And of course, at the age of 18, they have no hold over me. I'm of legal age now. I can do what I really is in my heart. So an old schoolmate of mine, he took me up to New South Wales, up to the monastery in Douglas Park. After 12 months, it comes time to take your vows for the very first time. And we take the vows of poverty, chastity and obedience. And of course the vows of poverty and obedience were a breeze for me. I didn't care if I never had a razoo to my name, and I didn't care where the missionaries sent me. They could have sent me to New Guinea, anywhere like that I would have gone in a heartbeat. The vow of chastity was by far the hardest for me. I began to, after I had vows for 12 months, I went to the novice master and I began to tell him how I was having some doubt that I wanted to continue religious life. And so he advised me to go home for a while for a holiday. And while I was at home, I reconnected with, I suppose, the outside world. And so it was then that I really made up my mind that I was not suitable for religious life. And when I left in 71, I turned my back on the church. I stopped going to Mass, I stopped going to the sacraments. And for the next 52 years, I just lived a life of doing whatever I wanted to do, really. I came home and my father wanted me to stay at home and help around the farm and so on. But I wasn't going to milk cows for the rest of my life. So I left and I went to Western Australia. And I spent 10 years over there, driving trucks mainly from Perth to Broome and return. We used to do Perth, Broome, return in 5 days. So the trucker was on the road all the time. But after 10 years, I left Western Australia and came back here to Victoria. And it was around that time that Lifeline in Geelong was first established. I was accepted as a counsellor with Lifeline. And it was around that time as well that I saw an ad as prison officers in the Geelong Advertiser. I decided that I would apply, and I waited for about 2 weeks, and I thought, no, nothing come through from the application. But then there was a letter to say that I had been accepted for training, and I enjoyed working with the prisoners. It was around that time that they had already established a lifeline here in Geelong, and they were looking for people to become phone counsellors. And so I applied, and through an interview process I was accepted. And I remember one night there was a lady, she rang, and I was on duty that particular night, and she had just been abused by her husband. And I said, oh my God, you know, you can't stay in the house, you've got to get out. We got her into some accommodation. She had 2 children with her, a little boy and a girl, and she continued her life pretty much as normal. I really started to feel attracted towards this woman. A few years later, we actually started thinking about getting married, and she was my first wife. Because of the shift work that I was working, it was hard leaving a woman at home of a night time on her own. And so she actually met a guy that she'd been friendly with years before she ever met me. And I think she had enough of life with me, working shift work and not being there to support her. And so she left me and took off with this other guy. After she left, I thought, okay, I'll go on my holidays, and went to Indonesia, and I met an Indonesian lady and brought her out here to Australia. And as time went on, we got married. There was a lot of money issues regarding our relationship with an Indonesian, and I said to her one day, you know, look, you're going to have to start contributing a little bit more towards the upkeep of the home. When I challenged her about, you know, not contributing sufficiently towards the upkeep of the home, she didn't take it too kindly. She walked out that door, and she would ring me, you know, quite often. And even though the conversations on the phone were friendly, and you know, there were no arguments, and there was no bitterness towards the breakup of the relationship, I decided that was it. And so after the failure of the second marriage, to fill that void, you know, that loneliness and that isolation in my life at the time, I started to drink fairly heavily. In the beginning it wasn't a lot, but then I slowly began to drink more and more until there was an overwhelming addiction to alcohol, because as I said, it killed that loneliness, it killed that isolation and depression, mostly chronic depression that I was going through at the time. And so I became an alcoholic, and it wasn't so much the taste of the alcohol, but it was the effect that I was getting from that, and it was drawing me further and further away from Jesus. Not that I realized it at the time, because I didn't really know what was missing out of my life, and I'm trying to fill that void and that loneliness with alcohol. Then there was the time when I began to go for walks, and I was passing St. Francis one morning, and there was an unusual number of cars outside the church this particular Sunday. And I thought, I wonder what's going on over there, over at this church. So I thought, no, I'm not going over there, because I was just, you know, I didn't like myself very much at the time. I didn't like what I'd done. I remember committing a sin of infidelity. But I took a few more steps, and this little voice was saying to me, hey, Geoff, come as you are. Come as you are. And that sort of stopped me in my tracks a bit. Come as you are. And I thought, no, I'm not going over there. So And I kept walking for a while. And this voice again says, come as you are. So I went back to the church. When I entered the church, there was a table with all these books on it, and I picked this book up, and on the front cover it said, From Gangland to Promised Land. And I wondered what this book was about. And there was a man looking after the books in the foyer, and I said to him, I'd like a copy of the book, but I've got no money. And he said, well, when John comes down off the sanctuary, you can have a talk to him. And so he came. When John came down after delivering his presentation for the up-and-coming mission, I said to him, John, I'd like a copy of your book, but I've got no money. And he flipped the inside cover of this book and signed it. God bless you, Geoff, John Pridmore, 10th of September 2023. And I thought to myself at that time, how did he know my name? You know, he must have got it from somewhere, but I don't know. God was probably working, and he knew my name. So I took the book home and I began to read it. And there was a section in the book that I was reading where it was about how John had lived a life as a gangster, and he was talking about his first confession. I was sitting in the church after Mass and met Father Darrell. I said to him that I would like to go to confession, but I don't feel worthy. I'm just so humiliated by everything that I've done. You know, probably committed every sin in the book almost, except murder. And then Father Darrell, he was so gentle and kind, and he says to me, come as you are. So I went to entered the confessional with him, and I said to him, Father, I don't know where to begin. And he said, well, what's the worst thing that you've done? You know, and he listened patiently to me as I told my story, and then it came time for me to make an act of contrition. And I didn't know the words to the act of contrition, and so I said my own, and it was, Primus, dearest Jesus, I am so sorry that I've hurt you so much over the past 52 years. And I know that you love me so much, and because of the love that you have for me, I don't want to hurt you anymore. We went through the words of powers invested in me from God above. I now absolve you from all of your sins. Not only the ones you can remember, but also the ones you can't remember. They're all gone, Geoff. They're all gone. And I felt like two 10-ton weights had been lifted off my shoulders. I was thinking about, you know, that incredible depth of forgiveness that Jesus had for me. And so I asked him, how can you possibly forgive me all the things that I've done, you know, even after these 52 years? And he came back to me in the back of my mind. He was saying to me, and I could clearly still hear those words, I forgive you, Geoff, because I love you more than you could ever possibly imagine. He was always there, but it was me that didn't want to connect with him. I was too ashamed of what I'd done. But that moment when he told me that he forgave me was the moment that changed my life. I began to think about how can I change my life? How can I give up the alcohol? And I thought, okay, well, I'll pick my mother's birthday, which was the 16th of September. Mum's birthday came and went, and I was drinking just as much. And so I thought, no, but I still wanted to give up the alcohol. So I thought, well, I can't do much about Mum's birthday now. I'll pick my own birthday, which was the 12th of December. My birthday came and went as well. And it was just the same. I kept drinking because the alcohol had now gripped me. I thought to myself, gosh, I'm just not going to be able to give up the alcohol. It's just too hard. And then again, the Holy Spirit has come into my life and said, okay, look, we need to give this another shot. We need to give this one more shot. And so I decided I would pick Christmas Day, the birth of Jesus. And for some reason or other, I decided that I wouldn't drink from that day on. And I never touched another drop of alcohol for the following 12 months. And again, it was just that transformation of turning my life over to Jesus. And he was now part of my life, and alcohol had no purpose in my life anymore. I think for the first time in my whole life, really, I began to feel a peace. Whenever I feel like, I'm lost and lonely and in need of a friend, I know Jesus is there. And that gives me the peace and strength to continue a life of prayer, because that is what eventually will hopefully lead me to heaven.